My name is Anna Kuczborska. I'm UFA Academy Coordinator, and before I'll pass the floor to our guest, let me briefly tell you about those two initiatives. UFA Academy is a series of open lectures that travels all across Europe, happening at our partner universities. The next set of lectures is planned for September, so stay tuned, visit ufa.eu website from time to time, and in the meanwhile, check lectures that have already happened and are still available at NCU YouTube channel. The UFA Community Engagement Network, however, is a new initiative that we undertake to foster joint actions for the European society benefits, but also to provide different actors, academics, professionals, people from different backgrounds, representatives from NGOs, for example, also, with opportunities to exchange knowledge and good practices in the field of the community engagement. This set of lectures is the first venture of the network that I hope that we all become part of. Our today's focus is on forced migration, an issue most European countries face. The meeting consists of two lectures. There will be a time for comments and questions in between and at the end of the second lecture. First part is held by PhD Piotr Sadowski from the Department of Human Rights at the Faculty of Law and Administration from NCU. And the first part is dedicated to the legal aspects of temporary protection of refugees from Ukraine. The second part will be presented by PhD Joanna Książek from the Department of Ethnology and Anthropology from the Faculty of Philosophy and Social Sciences, also from NCU. And the second part will address cultural background and relations and the attitudes toward wartime Ukrainian refugees in Poland. Thank you for coming. Mr. Sadowski, the floor is now yours.
Thank you very much for inviting me for this project. I'm really happy to be here. As you have already presented, I'll be talking about legal aspects, but I will try to focus not so much on EU law, because there's quite a lot of papers already on EU law. I would not also focus that much on Polish details of Polish law, but I would like to show what are the challenges for local communities in adopting their steps to address the needs of people from Ukraine. To begin with, I would like to stress it very clearly that I hope this will be an initiation of the discussion between our partners about is there really a need to adopt that law, so the directive from 2001 in practice, or could we achieve the same result in a different way? And whether this first activation of this law, which is, as you can see, quite old, whether it can be an incentive to change our national approaches, but also adopt new approach in the EU. And what I will be talking about is obviously from the perspective of EU countries, focusing on wartime refugees from Ukraine, but refugees from Ukraine in semi-quotes, because this term is already used and some institutions, also the EU institutions, promote it. But those people who benefit from this directive, technically speaking, from legal point of view, they are not refugees. So, but yes, they have protection. So if I will mention that they are refugees, please remember this is about this very particular group to whom this very directive applies. Okay, so we should start by saying that for me as a lawyer, it's absolutely clear that states are masters of the treaties. You probably know this rule, and you know probably this term maybe in different language versions. So for instance, herende vertege, or maybe just put it simply, the laws must be obeyed. So if you signed the contract, you have to follow it. That's basically what this rule says. But it means that you can also change the contract. So you can change the law. You can refrain from adopting it by saying, I'm not a member of this contract anymore. So if you don't like it, just take appropriate decision. But if you sign it, just try to follow it in, and here comes the very particular thing, in the best way you can to achieve the aim of the treaty. So it's not only the letter offer, so what the treaty exactly says, but also the idea. What was the idea for we call them founders of the treaties, what they thought about when they tried to establish the law. And in this very particular case, when we are talking about refugees, this is absolutely needed because, firstly, there's only one convention worldwide applicable, which is the UN Convention from 1951, and this convention has been amended only once in the 60s. So we can say that the methods of ongoing conflicts, the way they are addressed, the cruelty of these conflicts have changed so radically that in real life, most of the people will not get refugee protection from the Act from 1951 because they do not meet, technically speaking, we say they do not meet the prerequisites to get it, because there is a list of catalog of reasons. If your reason for applying for protection is there, you get it. If it's not there, sorry, we do not give you this form of protection. So in this context, it's extremely important to remember that it was already when they drafted this law, when the fathers of this treaty, they said, and here's a quotation from the convention, they explicitly said that they expressed the hope that the convention, so the refugee convention, will have value as an example exceeding its contractual scope. So it was already then that they knew that there will be other people in need, so they encourage the states to welcome them if they are coming for protection because of the reasons which they couldn't simply agree in 1951. And you have to remember this was 1951, so obviously the convention was addressed about the World War II. Okay. The problem was that in 50s, of course, international law worked in a completely different way. So they haven't decided to establish any institution at the UN level which will be empowered to give instructions how to read this law in a binding way to the states. So they may suggest something, but states may say, okay, but this is not what I've signed, and I don't read it in this way. But there is one particular piece of what the countries agreed, and this is a UNHCR handbook, and I have never ever seen any court decision which would say, I don't agree with this, well, we call it soft law. So it's not hard law, so you have to follow it, but you should. So it's soft law. And this is very much visible here in the EU, because when we started to implement the EU asylum policy, we decided that we take as a foundation this refugee convention and we give more than the refugee convention says. So this is why I was talking so much about these new forms of conflict. So not to leave these people aside, we have special extra form of protection. By the way, we had in Poland this form of protection before it was adopted at the EU. So it also shows that we can do something to show that, hey, this is a good way to follow. And we are the neighboring country to non-EU countries, so this is also important to remember. So what the EU agreed was, they agreed who is responsible for examining the application for protection. So if, for instance, a foreigner comes at Polish border, he or she asks for protection and then goes to Germany and asks one again for protection, it makes no sense to have two applications ongoing. So who should take care of this person and who should see if this person is a refugee or not? This is so-called Dublin mechanism. It used to be a convention. It's still actually in force, but in the EU it's a regulation, so you apply it directly. And there is a list of hierarchy of criteria. And the first and the most important one is obviously about family, and then you check about the duration of stay and so on and so forth. Then we have this harmonized EU forms of protection, and we have instructions on procedures. So how do you check the asylum application? Do you have a meeting or interview, as it's professionally called, with the person who applies? When can you give decision rejecting? Do you have to give this person a right to interpreter for free, obviously, interpreter for free? Or what about access to professional lawyers? So this is already in the EU, and Also, it stipulates what kind of conditions, material conditions, the people who wait for decision should get. So, for instance, it says that people should be accommodated, yeah? But we don't have special rules what accommodation means. So, for instance, should you have 2 meters, square meters, 3 square meters? It's not in the EU law. So it's quite precise, but it can be even more precise. Now, these laws have been changed, they've been amended, except one law. So there are 3 directives, 3 have been changed, but there's one directive, so we have 4 of them, which has not been changed. And this is exactly the law I'll be talking about. So the law which has been used for the first time when the war in Ukraine re-evoked in 2022. This is the directive 2001/55. Okay, the directive explicitly says, obviously, that it doesn't make the Geneva Convention on Refugees obsolete, so, and it actually cannot make it obsolete. So you can give people who are at your border because of a war which appeared in a large conflict, you can give them at the border temporary protection, but they still can apply for refugee status. And there are different approaches to them. I made some research on it with my friend about Czech Republic and Poland, comparative research. So, for instance, Czechs suspend the application for refugee because they say, hey, you already have something. So we will see later when this temporary protection will cease. Okay. In Poland, we continue, by the way, with recognition. So the problem with this directive, and it was very clear when the war in Ukraine re-erupted, was that actually the EU directive says that it can be used for the benefit of people coming from a country or a specific geographic region, and who arrive, obviously these people arrive at EU borders, when they come in a large number. And there is no definition of what a large number is. So how big is big enough to be a large number? That's the question, yeah? So, and this is the directive. So you have to remember that it can be activated not when one country is already affected, but when the situation is important to the EU. Because there is this, one of the foundations actually of the EU law is that it is applied proportionately. So when local measures cannot be sufficient enough. And if you think about the former crisis, 2015-16, the EU actually implemented different methods. They used decisions of the Council to help Greece and to help Italy in dealing with the large number of people who came there. So we said, okay, this is not a problem of the EU, this is a problem of Greece, this is a problem of Italy, although we as other countries, we try to give them help as much as we can. And there are a couple of things that you could do under that decisions. So you could, for instance, just send money to, for instance, buy food. You could send, obviously, food or mattress. You could send the border guards to control the borders. So yes, it was effective. It was quickly adopted, but still, when one of the countries, which was a transit country, asked, okay, but we are a small country and there are so many people crossing us, what should we do? The court in Luxembourg said, well, this is your problem, because the EU has not activated this temporary protection directive. So it is, I really like this expression for Kerber when we have it, that it's not the inefficiency of our system that justifies initiating this directive, but a problem for the whole EU to address, firstly, quickly, and secondly, properly, the large number of people without defining how large is large enough. So this is very theoretical, so now let's go into practice. So according to Eurostat, in March 2024, there were more than 4 million people who benefit already from the directive. Now, can you imagine a country giving 4 million individual decisions? I mean, a refugee application procedure takes really a lot of time because it's very personalized, it's very in-depth, whereas here you just say, okay, you came from a country or a specific region, I can check it, and you can stay legally in our country, yes, under this temporary protection. So most of these people, a vast majority of these people, have not applied for refugee status. And if you want to check if this law is efficient or not, just please remember that in the whole last year, there were 1 million applications for refugee status, and it was still an increase when you compare it to the former year. And actually, most of the people who get a decision denying them refugee protection, it's only them who go to the court. So if you get the protection, you don't go to the court. So this shows that really, I mean, if you help 4 million people, more than 4 million people who are in need of protection, then this tool is needed. So the whole decision takes at its back the humanitarianism, because we are talking about humanitarian law. And the idea was that people should, as quickly as possible, could legally cross the border and then get a kind of a document certifying that they are legally here, so that we can start providing them with a direct support, direct help, medical help, accommodation, food, and access to education, access to labor market. And this is also different from people who apply for refugee, because if they are applying for refugee, they, for instance, cannot go immediately to work, at least in Poland, because the states can say so, but in Poland we haven't said so. So they are still accommodated, but they cannot go to work, whereas people who came from Ukraine under this temporary protection mechanism, or to be specific, under the Council decision, which started it, they can just go to work. Okay, and for me this is very important, and I will be coming back to this issue a couple of times. So they can enter to safe area, they are not under attack. This is the whole idea. We try to figure out if somebody is in a vulnerable position, and this is important because this inflow of people is very particular, because actually I've read somewhere that 78% of the people who came are women and children. So this is very feminized migration, we say. And of course, the needs of women and children are different than from the needs of the men. So our countries were not so much prepared for this. Okay, one more thing to mention here, that this is a temporary protection. So it's temporary by design. You have it in its name. And for me, this is really a big problem, because if something is temporary, you are not sure for how long it will apply. The directive has a list of methods of calculating the maximum duration, but still it's quite short term. And even if you can stay here, you get first the total duration period, but then it was extended, and once again it was extended, and that's max. We cannot do in the EU anything more. But this has an impact on the people, because just think about you. What would you do if you know that you came to a country just temporarily? I mean, for me, this is all about predictability. So yes, on one hand, it is easy. You come at the border, you say, I'm from this geographic region, so the border guard, after checking it, should let me in, except that if you are a terrorist or war criminal. But that's another side of a story. But yes, we can check it. And then you can already start benefiting from certain rights which are the list is provided in the directive. And this is important because, for instance, Polish law was lacking such a list. So it said people are granted temporary protection and they can benefit from it, but how can you benefit if you don't know what is your right? So for Poland, this Council decision was important because we changed the law. We had actually special law applicable to these people, and it contains a very detailed list what they can get. So, and the law was adopted very quickly, which is also good. But for instance, in Czech Republic, the list was already there, and this is important because if you are a local administration, or if you are a person who directly works with people who are in need of protection, international protection, then you should know who can come to you. You should know more or less what service can you deliver. You should know where are the money coming from. Whereas in Poland, we were in this huge uncertainty, and it was only when this law was adopted when part of the things had been clarified. So the people can come, cross the border, can feel safe, but now let's think about the for me, the most important thing here, so except, of course, immediate safely, integration perspectives. So if you come for a temporary period, there must be an incentive for both sides to integrate. And for instance, in Czech Republic, when the council implementing decision was implemented, the government asked to prepare 3 action plans: short-term, mid-term, and long-term, about integration. So they already thought, okay, it's temporary mechanism. We do not envisage that it will stay here forever, but we want you to think maybe you should start integrating the people. And we found in our research, we found an interesting example of 5 cities where most of people from Ukraine stay. And in one of the cities, actually a huge number of children in local schools were from Ukraine. So this shows exactly what problems local administration faces, because it's something else that you have a small group of children in the whole school who come from country, and then if they actually become a huge minority in the school, these people, you also have to think that these people run out of war, so they may be traumatized, they may need psychological help. Here, Polish example is a very good one, because they have had immediately an access to medical help. But, you know, the doctor must communicate with those people. So we need an interpreter, we need, also these people may not be aware what kind of rights they have when they come to ask for medical support. But yes, in Poland, they have a medical support. Accommodation, this is also a challenge. I mean, in Poland, the former government decided to go back to what was many years before. So they wanted to accommodate all the people in joint accommodation centers, either run by the government or financed by the government. There was a trend in recent years in Poland that people could ask for getting money to find place wherever they wanted to stay. So for instance, a family could find a flat and rent a flat. And the former government, which was voting very much for centralization, they said, no, this should be limited. People should basically stay in the places we arrange for them. And of course, it's a matter of discussion whether you prefer centralized or decentralized system. Both have advantages and disadvantages. But here, it was impossible to find accommodation for so many people. Accommodation, and here comes the word from directive, which is adequate. Okay, the directive just mentions adequacy, but what is adequate accommodation? Yeah, so when the people came to our local communities said, but we don't have any place. Where would you accommodate them? Yeah, I mean, it's quite simple to arrange a place for immediate action. So like you have a fire in the building and you put people there for 2-3 nights, but these people, I mean, they knew that they will stay longer. They haven't knew how long, but they knew that they will stay longer than this. So should they be accommodated in a joint accommodation centers without privacy or extremely limited privacy, or should we move them to other place? So this is what I'm driving at. I mean, for local communities, it was very hard to predict how many people will come and when they will come, how long they will stay. Of course, people move here and there, which is obvious. So this is another problem, because you have to show the accommodation place to the people. The same with schooling. I mean, people came with children and they could go to school. They went, but the education systems between our countries still differ. So would you recognize that a child was at, for instance, 5th grade in Ukraine? So you say you go to the 5th grade, or would you see what this child has already passed in school? So this is, and who should make this decision, you know? So this is really complicated. And especially for countries like Poland, where we haven't had many recognized refugees before, our system of integration and approaching refugees was based very much on individualization. So if you are living in a city, in a town, in a village close to a reception center for refugees, then the schools were ready, because these were the schools where children were going to. But in cities which are not so close to these places, it was very difficult to figure out who is the teacher who can, for instance, teach people who come from slightly different, but still different culture from Polish culture, yeah? Or the language. I mean, I wouldn't assume that each person from Ukraine understands Polish enough to learn in this language. I mean, this is something else. So here these problems came out, and the communities, I mean, the government tried to give some tools, but for instance, they said that for accommodation, you can readapt places which couldn't be used because of not meeting technical conditions. So, I mean, that's good because we still have a place to accommodate the people, but on the other hand, is it really adequate? I mean, would you like to live in a place which is, for instance, not safe? The communities also haven't had an idea how much money they will get for this. So how can you, for instance, invest in specialized accommodation center if you don't know if somebody will pay you back the money? So it's really a big problem. But here, this problem resulted also partially from a good decision, actually, by the government not to force people to stay in one area. So people from Ukraine, they could move all around Poland, select a place where they want to stay based on different reasons. And this is a key thing in this council implementing decision, because in the EU, when we also mentioned that, if you cross the border or if you were here, there is a set of rules saying in which country you have to stay. So you wait there until you get the decision, but it's also difficult to move later on. Whereas those people from Ukraine, not only Ukrainians, because the directive applies to people from Ukraine, not only from Ukrainians, they could select a country where they go to. Why? Because people from Ukraine were already very widely distributed in the EU. So it made no sense to stop them in one country, because we already knew, okay, if your husband is already in Portugal or in Spain, why should you stay in Slovakia, for instance, or Poland? Yeah. If your wife is already in Germany, why should you stay in Romania? Yeah. So we suspended this mechanism of staying in one country. Well, different things happen here, but generally, if you get already protection in that country, you should stay in this country, yeah, with the temporary protection mechanism. And I did some research lately, and I checked how it works. So in Poland, we still don't have any cases, but please remember, this is a quite recent decision, so they may not already appeared at the courts, but we don't have many cases when this was a problem. In Poland, we actually have no cases like that. In Czech Republic, there were 3 cases where people already got the temporary protection in one country and then went back to Czech Republic and wanted protection, and they were denied because they already could benefit from it in other country. Okay, so I've already mentioned the fact that people are uncertain where they stay and what they can do, but it also affects the whole life of those people. So, for instance, should they be able to get employment? Yes, that's clear in the directive. But what it means, gain employment? I mean, somebody should offer them work, okay? In Poland, we need workers, so it was quite easy. They were going into new professions, they were changing their professions. But from this report from Germany, it's quite clear that actually most of the people work below their qualifications. And you have to remember that this is also very particular for this war, that firstly, I've already mentioned that women came with children as a dominant factor, but they are well educated. This is another factor. They speak usually many languages, foreign languages. They are aware of the culture. So for them, finding a job is a bit easier than for somebody who has no connections or no qualifications. In this report from Germany, it says that actually the level of education in Ukraine is so good that what people are trained already in the companies, those people come with this knowledge. So it's quick to adopt them to new working conditions. But still, I mean, the problem is, what would you do in so-called regulated professions? For instance, doctors, nurses. I mean, we definitely in Poland, we need nurses, we need doctors. Education system in Ukraine is good. Why shouldn't we give them a right to practice as nurses, as doctors? So it's about recognizing their qualifications for professional reasons. And here came some problems. So firstly, I mean, each country has own procedures in medical things. Secondly, you should know the language. You are the doctor, you are communicating with the people, yeah? So there was actually a decision to say, okay, if your qualifications are already recognized and if you speak the language, you can work as a doctor, as a nurse. But this depends on a sort of qualifications are needed. Yeah, and in some examples can be also said when people actually work, for instance, in a hospital, but they do not work as a nurse, but as lower level personnel. Yeah, so they should have an access, and this is what I'm driving at, to vocational educational trainings. So not only trainings meaning university degrees, which is, by the way, also here innovative factor. Not only schooling for children, which is always obviously available, but also those short courses which will make you gain new knowledge and new skills, which you may then use at the local market, labor market. But in my research, actually, I recently focused on continuation of remote work in Ukraine. And this is a very particular thing. I found somewhere that 28% of people from Ukraine actually still work in Ukraine, but in a remote way. And this shows that the world is changing, the methods of war are changing, but the question is what to do with providing them with direct support, financial support, for instance, or social support. Everybody can get social support. It is designed to be there. So if you qualify to get it, you should get it. That's fair. But in Polish law, there is a rule which applies to everybody. It says that if you already have some earnings, we can give you less because you already have some earnings. And here I'm talking about a large number of people. So we have a lot of people whom we should help. And, you know, the finances are always not enough, let's say. So I think, and I actually deduce it from Polish constitution, that it's better to give lower level of support but to larger number of people than to give a limited number of people a lot of rights and leave others aside without anything. But the question is, how do you find out if somebody is already gaining any money? For instance, from copyrights or doing remote work. So, I mean, I don't know the answer. I would like to hear from the people who actually provide this direct support. Do they have this kind of a problem, or maybe I'm exaggerating? There is one more thing here. I mean, people from with beneficiary protection, they can set up a company in our countries. And people from Ukraine are generally very active and they operate well. So do you have already people who come to you and say, hey, I would like to establish a company in, for instance, Toruń, and how could I get any help in establishing it? For instance, financial help or maybe advisor checking it. So if you know about it, please let me know. This is really I think important. And I further mentioned this recognition of professional qualifications for work, but it's also about recognition of diplomas for work. But we have one more thing here, is recognition of studies for study purposes. So it's something else. So you have a student from Ukraine who came to Poland. Could he or she continue to his or her studies, but in our university? So in Poland, for instance, we changed the academic year to make it possible for those people to come to study. Some other changes were also introduced. For instance, in our university, we have had special units responsible for coordination of actions to people from Ukraine. We also have had a possibility for them to come to our law clinic. So this was already implemented very quickly. And I mean, all of these things show you that for the local administration, for the people who work with those people, it was really challenging because they were not so much ready. I mean, you are never ready for a large number of people, but at least in these smaller communities, there should be somebody who knows what is the law, how to implement it in practice, whereas these deficiencies in law made it impossible to be prepared, even, you know, just get some basic training before. So everybody was learning by doing. And when I visited our local administration, I really felt that the people try to be helpful. I had an impression that they want to continue with the procedures. There were special people established for giving just basic help, trying to organize the thing. So of course there were a lot of also problems, but the decision of the government, which was very much to decentralize the country, in this way that they said, okay, no, centralization is okay, but there are too many people, we will not manage. Decentralize it. Let the people select the area where they stay and let the people there register them. So give them the very first certainty, let's say. It really worked. And actually, now there are two questions. One is for Poland is, should we change the law? Because we cannot start, and we have an external border with the EU, we cannot start this kind of protection by ourselves. Just to tell you, Czech Republic has this option. The Prime Minister Council can vote for adopting this kind of protection. We don't have it. We have had it, but we don't have it anymore. The second thing is, should we amend the act on granting international protection to foreigners, so to include these things which we developed for people from Ukraine as a mechanism which will be clearly visible, so that local administration can get ready for it, at least at the level of trainings, knowing more or less who pays for what and when. This is also important. And thirdly, it's a question of integration. How to integrate the people? Should we integrate the people? I mean, for me, we definitely should integrate the people. But this is about looking at shorter or longer perspective. So, as I've already mentioned, in Czech Republic, they have short-term, mid-term, long-term perspective. But long-term means 3 years, whereas, for instance, in the UK, you can ask people from Ukraine to come to the UK. You give them visas, you give them accommodation, you give them integration program, and you give them a permit to stay for 5 years. So we give them here a year, and they give them 5 years. So what is more stable? Yeah, what makes you really feel needed in the society, be integrated? And just to mention why I'm talking about the UK, I mean, they are not EU country anymore. Well, they have a special law which contains a list of legal acts which are still binding the UK, although they are not in the EU. And actually, this directive is there. So what they did in practice, they said, we don't care about this EU law, which was quite strange for me to know. But what they did is they established their own national rules, which are very close to this directive. So they meet this aim of the law. This is what I'm saying. So it's not enough to say, okay, we have the law, the practice matters. And yes, they could, technically speaking, say that they have good practice. Okay. So the question is what to do next. And here comes the 3 important questions for me. Firstly, money. You know, this directive is from 2001. It was not used before. As I mentioned, it was difficult because of definitions. But first, how would you define a country or geographic area in context of what has happened in 2015-16 crisis? I mean, would you say, for instance, I don't know, the Cape of Africa? I mean, not everybody from there was in need of protection. Would you say Africa? I mean, come on, Africa is a large continent. So, but there are also other things which make me feel that those who criticize the thing that, you started it because it's Ukraine, it's a neighboring country. I mean, this is actually in line with all the needs. I mean, they are in immediate danger. So that's the first thing. And secondly, we were cooperating quite closely even before. So, for instance, there were special rules which made it easier for people from Ukraine to come to the EU. So there was a common legal space to make it working. The passports which they issue are, for instance, are very secure. Yeah. So we know it. So why not to do it? Yeah. And so if somebody says it's always discriminating people from other regions, I don't think so. We could say so if there would be a war somewhere else, and then the EU will say, oh, we are not doing the same thing. But you have to have a really similar situation, whereas I don't think we have had similar situation before. So what to do with the directive? Well, I think we should think about amending it, because there are still a lot of things which are unclear there. It shows that this is a minimum what the countries agreed, because in those days when the law was adopted, there was only minimum harmonization of EU law. But the question is what to do later with the people from Ukraine. Yeah, and I think, and I have an impression that states are left here with the decisions what to do, which is on one hand good, but it's not so predictable. In Poland, we are drafting the laws on this, so they should be probably available before the temporary protection ceases to be there. But still, we should think also about financing and co-financing of these people. So, and this is an emergency instrument in law. So, and we have emergency situations. So, I mean, was it really so difficult to predict that when large number of people come, you need more money than if you have small number of people? I mean, it was not a complicated thing to predict. But it makes me feel that this directive from 2001, when it was implemented to help after the last war in Europe, so after the war in former Yugoslavia, it's still mentally there. Okay, so it focuses on needs of the people, which is good, but it doesn't, I mean, what kind of rights you can benefit if there are no money to finance those rights? Yeah, so here's another thing which should probably be changed. And maybe this also the thing that we have this temporary suspension mechanism of Schengen rules, maybe it should also be here. I've referred to the research which I've already done on it, so here you can see the photos of the different journals which they were published. But the most important for me, and this is why they are here, is the slide at the lower part of the screen. Which is the article which was published in 2022, but it was sent to the journal a bit before, about what kind of rights have people who came to work in Poland. And why I'm mentioning it? Because actually in this article I claim that Poland needs more predictable system of, for instance, providing language trainings to foreigners. When people from Ukraine came, one of the questions I've received quite frequently was, where can I learn Polish? Yeah, and the answer was, sorry, we ran out of places. Yeah, because we were not prepared for this. Because whatever the government before was in Poland, they were always saying a matter of integration is a matter mainly of legal migrant. If it was a refugee, then this person could go to special people in local administration. There were people who provide direct support, like social support, and they designed integration project for this person. It's very good. This is how it should be done. It's individualized, but it creates problems, because then if you have a large group of people, then you know nothing. Plus, it very much depends on how the person to whom you talk to, how this person is educated about your problems and your issues. And if this person was specialized in this area, it's okay, but sometimes in some communities, this was not a question. So in this article, I also claim that if you come for a short period of time, it's easier to overuse you. Because, for instance, you don't know the differences between different types of contracts which you sign. And I mean here contracts which give you an obligation, which imposes on you an obligation to work. So in Poland, we have civil law contracts and we have employment contracts, and there are differences between them. Also as regards, for instance, responsibility. So what will happen if you have an accident at work, okay? What will happen if you will create a risk to somebody, yeah? So, so I think that we should take this conflict as an initiation of discussion, where we are, where should we go, what were the problems of local communities and how they address them, so to change the law, but to make it simply efficient. Because we can design all the laws on earth, but nobody knows what are the real life examples, except for the people who work with those who are in need of protection. So if you are working there in the local community, if you are among the people who provide the support, please feel free to contact me. You have all my details here. And most of the papers which I wrote are actually available there, so you can easily get them. Thank you very much, and I stay open for your questions and comments.
Thank you. It's really very complex, right, situation, very problematic. And as you said, we were learning by doing, and there were also very bottom-up initiatives happening, and the law had to follow the people, right?
Exactly.
In your opinion, did it happen in a good pace, in a good atmosphere, even though a crisis atmosphere?
I would say that actually the civil society plus local administration worked firstly quicker, more efficient and better, at least at the beginning, than the central administration, but without a goodwill of people who use their own time, who use their own cars, who gave people shelter. I mean, the whole system will collapse, simply speaking. And this is but your question is very good, because you have to remember that the government which was at that time in Poland was the government which said no to taking a small group of people from Italy and Greece. And it was exactly the same government when they said, no, sorry, these people run immediately from the area where is war, so let them in. So see, I mean, it also has good mentality changes. I mean, it shows that when you are directly affected, this is not somebody who you don't know, this is your neighbor. So this is how it should work, basically. But I think we still need something to prepare us for another crisis situation. I mean, being spontaneous is okay, but the country shouldn't depend on spontaneous goodwill or badwill of its own
People shouldn't
national.
depend on it.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But yes, local communities and NGOs, and there are a lot of foundations which were established to help. And this works both ways. I don't want to take your presentation here.
Time.
But also in Toruń we have had good examples of both sides being involved. So it's not only Poles that were involved, but also those who already started to benefit from it, started to provide help to others. So this is another example why it worked.
Yeah, I think it would be very interesting to hear the voices from the representatives of NGOs working directly with the refugees. Once I had a possibility to take part in a meeting when almost all NGOs dealing with refugees in Toruń met together to confront and to cooperate, and I was really impressed how many problems they have to deal with and how good they cooperate with each other. So it's really a great problem and great challenge for them. But actually, I think this whole story you told us and this view of the situation, as I think we take a lesson from this situation, because it shows that our government doesn't cooperate enough in the with the NGOs, and we need it. And this exactly in this crisis situations, we don't know what will happen in the future, and we will have to be prepared for it, I think. So we will take the lesson from this situation.
Yeah.
But that's also why networking is so important, and that is good that we're also starting this new network at UFE. So maybe we can still exchange those good practices and even teach people those lessons so they wouldn't have to learn the hard way, right?
Obviously. And you know, this is also a very pro-future thing, because nowadays those people stay in our countries. But I hope that the war will end soon. And when these people will be able to go back to Ukraine, their knowledge they will have here received, the practical skills, the contacts they have established, they will work for the benefit of Ukraine.
Yes.
For instance, just think about teachers. Teachers from Ukraine came here, they can cooperate with Polish teachers, they can learn new techniques of teaching or different methods of teaching, they can see, for instance, how to organize rooms and so on. And then after going back to Ukraine, they can use it, not for the benefit only of small group of students or pupils, but everybody can benefit from it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Also, our researchers cooperate closely, including my faculty. We cooperate very closely, actually, with colleagues from Ukraine. So this will continue later on. The people get new knowledge, and it helps also for Ukraine. At least I hope that it will help Ukraine in integration with European Union. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this can be really a good thing if you think also about it in a longer term. And I really like what you said, because this is exactly what you can read in the introductory part to the Refugee Convention 1951. So it says about strengthening ties and supporting not only the people, but also, and here comes the idea why I focus on this, communities which host them.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not talking about the governments which host them, but communities that host them.
Yeah.
And it's also about awareness, who the person from this country is, how to approach this person, what kind of questions may be difficult to answer. So you shouldn't expect everybody to tell you the whole story of their life, for instance. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that Polish society really behaved well, and later on it was used by the government to streamline the process, which is okay, except that it should be more predictable, and also in terms of money. I mean, somebody must pay it in a regular way. And here, the way it was done was
chaotic.
Yeah, I would say very difficult, or maybe even unconstitutional. One of the articles I wrote was actually about it. So with my friend, I wrote about it. So it's difficult to organize a stay for people if you don't know how much money you have.
Yeah, that's right. I would add only that it's the knowledge and the experience the Ukrainians will take with them when coming home will not only develop Ukraine as a state and community, but also will contribute to the mutual relationships between our two countries and communities. So it will be really a great thing, and I hope only that the knowledge and the experience they gather here will only good. So, and we know it won't be only good, but
most of them,
I think, yeah.
Yeah, people are different, of course. And they have different needs, different reasons. They behave in different ways because of different reasons. So, you know, sometimes people say, "Oh, they do not behave. Somebody behaves in this way or that way." I mean, you know, if we are talking really about refugees, these are people who run out of a direct persecution. We have had a presentation from the man who is actually responsible in one of the organizations for collecting proofs of war crimes which are committed by Russians in Ukraine. So he said that he heard a lot of stories. So if you have somebody who had these experiences, or who have seen these experiences, or whose family member had these experiences, I mean, this person also needs some other forms of support, yeah, like psychological support, good contacts, feeling secure. It takes time for this person to adopt to new rules.
Especially when you're a mother, right? Fleeing country with your kid, and you don't have that much time to, because you still have a kid to watch over. You don't have that much.
But this is also interesting what you say, because children could go to kindergartens, they could go to schools, and still our economies extremely highly benefited from the arrival of people from Ukraine. So, I mean, the reason why they had to leave is absolutely terrible, just to make it clear. But it shows that if people have a chance to stay in a place which they feel safe, if they can adopt to local needs, then they will be beneficial to local community also in this way, yeah? And as you said, people come with children, sometimes quite a lot of them, because they were not only their children also. And still they could organize it. You know, the children were going to Ukrainian school in a remote way, and you know, they were walking in the city, but at the same time the people went to work. So it is possible if the system is well organized, and if this is what I'm driving at, if you are trained to do it, and if there is an eagerness in society to help, because this should be a two-sided process. We had, for instance, in Torrent, these picnics for integration picnics organized, and there were really a lot of people there, which was really good. And
yeah, and before we move further to this eagerness and this cultural aspects of the also the relation between the hosting community and the refugees, let me just open for the comments of the audience. If there is anything on the chat, let me just quickly see. And if you want to just speak up, then unmute your microphone and join the discussion. Quickly just check. And if not, then we will just move forward to those cultural aspects, and maybe then our audience will engage at the end.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here among the UFE community.
We are pleased to have you among us.
To take part in this inauguration event. So thank you very much for inviting me. Oh, okay. Cultural background of relationships and attitudes towards wartime Ukrainian refugees in Poland. Long title, but we talk here about protection and integration. And we know after the presentation of Piotr we already know these two aspects are very connected, and I just wanted to say, well, the integration, we ask, is it necessary, or there are still some kind of questions. I remember the first months of the war when I already questioned. I was asking about integration, and people said, oh no, it's too fast, let's wait, we don't know what will happen. So the integration in case of refugees, it's, I would say, much more questionable than protection, because we don't know how many people will stay, of course, yes, and for how long, if they will go further to Western Europe and so on and so on. But I think more than 2 years of war justifies enough talking about integration of Ukrainian refugees. And also I would add that integration is also a kind of protection. Yes, protection from exclusion, I would say, social exclusion. We can add actually that in some way integration is also a little bit more complex than protection, because protection, we have this one-way movement, someone gives protection to someone else, but in integration we have two-way process. Yes, that means that two groups are actively involved in this process. Integration indicators, I mean through this term steps that should be done to talk about successful integration, but it's only a background to what we will talk about further. There is a kind of simplified model, and in many theoretical models of integration we have some basic elements which are rather system solution, which law to which also law also belongs. Yes, this system solutions. And for example, we have the equal access to work, yeah, to access to the labor market, access to accommodation, so to have a flat, access to education, and equal education chances, equal access to social services and other things. Yeah, but these are these basic things, and very often, as kind of additionally, yes, added, it appears also social acceptance, and also the point to be free to behave one's cultural identity. I would say the second part is kind of soft elements, so mutual relations, where also the host society attitude and acceptance are important. But actually, when we take any integration aspects, this from the left side, we see that more or less they all depend on people attitude. Someone, that means particular person, someone rents you an apartment, someone employs you at work, someone deals with your official stuff in an office, someone teaches your child at school, and finally someone interacts with you in many fields of everyday life, and this someone has always his attitude to you. So these two parts, I would say, they are inseparable. I don't know if it's good visible, this question mark. Yeah, this question mark and equal mark. Okay, I would say that this attitude we were talking about has, of course, its general human dimension, yes? That means human helps human, regardless circumstances. But it's actually rarely totally unconditioned. This help, what we call on the human level, help human to human, yes, unconditioned. It's really rarely. And each attitude has also its cultural background, which allows us to understand why we think about someone in a certain way and why we behave in a certain way while interacting with him. So this is a short plan, schedule of my presentation. Once more, of course, we will talk about mutual relationships between Poles and Ukrainian refugees in Poland, but actually I will focus rather on the attitude of host society toward Ukrainian refugees and, of course, their cultural background. And after all, at the end, I will try to show how some cultural constructions rooted very deeply in history exist still today, especially in the wartime, and how they take part in communication process between us, I mean Poles and Ukrainian refugees. So let's have a look at some cultural, social and historical factors which influence social attitude toward Ukrainian refugees. I called it many faces of the factors affecting relationships because some of them really have many faces. What I mean through it is that some of them have positive value, positive impact, and some of them negative, and some of them have both of them depending on the situation. Cultural proximity is first. As you mentioned already, it's very important and it helps us to communicate, of course. So, but we also say it's relative, because I think for someone from Western Europe, our cultural proximity is closer, is bigger than we consider the situation. We are always looking of differences between our nations because it builds our identity. So that's why I saw it's always relative. What I mean is ethnic and cultural similarities, manners, customs, also folklore, as we can see here at the upper picture. Confession, although that there is a division in Ukraine more Orthodox and Poland Catholic, but so the differences are there, but they are still Christian religions. Next point, Slavic language. This is actually a part of cultural proximity. We talk both Slavic languages, and it's really beneficial for both. We can it helps to communicate, but there is also a kind of stereotype, and very often for people from Western Europe, that these both languages, Ukrainian and Polish, are almost the same, and that we can communicate effortless, and that it comes automatically. And it's not true. It's not true. We have to learn this language really, and the lack of language skills is really very often a cause why well-educated people from Ukraine can start the job on their qualification level. Yes, that's what Piotr already said. So yeah, this is also. These are also two faces of this language. It's similar, but we both have to learn it. Next point are former contacts and experiences with Ukrainian people. And I mean not only because of our neighborhood, what is obvious, but I mean here the fact that in the last decades the contact with Ukrainian economical migrants increased, especially since 2014 and occupation of Crimea. And this aspect has also two faces. It's obvious that the Ukrainian workers are really needed in Poland, yes, and Poland benefits from their work. But sometimes the level of social relations, and according to some opinions, economic migrants are spoiling the labor market because they work for lower wages. So we can need also this kind of voices. And another point. In the situation with refugees, it came out that our imagination about life in Ukraine and Ukrainians themselves was based on our former experiences with these economical workers and migrants who were working mostly on low-skilled jobs like housekeeping, elder care, gardening, agricultural, building, work, season jobs. So, and to a certain degree, paid work and its type became a kind of cultural blanket for Ukrainians in eyes of Poles. Meanwhile, during the war, we all know not only wealthy but also highly educated and highly qualified people came to Poland. And I think it's not a very big problem, but I think it took a while to us to shift from this mentioned cultural blanket into a wider view of Ukrainian society. And next point, common enemy. It's obvious and quite clear, but of course Russia in the past, but even more now, appears as enemy for both nations actually. And regarding the attitude of Poles toward Russians, due to the historical experience and social narrative, and in many people's minds, it exists something like eternal threat from the side of the Russian Empire. And Russia and Russians are still perceived quite negatively at the level of cultural memory, historical memory. And research shows a low level of sympathy for them among Polish society. Still, it was also before the war quite low level of sympathy. Of course, after the collapse of Soviet Union, the new beginning regarding relations between two countries, Poland and Russia, started. So great business partner. Russia was a great business partner, and economic interests were flourishing actually, but not anymore. Let's see the next point. Current events, for example, economical issues. What I mean. The society is to some degree sensitive to current events, what occurs nowadays, and I mean the events with participation of Ukrainians, especially those of bigger scale. And the latest example is a reaction of Polish farmers protesting and striking against privilege given to Ukrainian transport of grain into Poland and through Poland during the war, what causes losses for Polish farmers. This is the lower picture here. In one case, it came even to pouring Ukrainian grain from railways wagons, what we can see here on the picture. Dissatisfaction and criticism was also observable as a reaction for problems with access to social services at the beginning of the war. I meant here some lacks and system solutions. And it was system failure, but it was sometimes interpreted as a fault of Ukrainians themselves. Yes. And one before last point, state and political aims, demography, economy, geopolitics. What I mean, to some extent, political message coming from government, official state position, disseminated in official narrative also influences people's attitudes toward Ukrainian refugees. For example, when they talk about demography, that we need more people in our country, and this is always good when they have this cultural proximity. So it's the best when they're our neighbors, and economical issues and geopolitics. But we have the last point, last but not least, common history and cultural memory of the past. And this common history is a little bit provocative because, well, I will show the next slide because we will have a map here. Border changes in history of Poland. I will short explain the pink one. The pink territory is nowadays Poland, so after 1945, after the World War II. Then the gray one is the Second Polish Republic, and the biggest one is the so-called Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Yes, and 16th and 18th century. So really, really great territory. And Poles and lots of Ukrainians for a long period of time have lived in one really big territory. I mean here this Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. And after World War I and Second Polish Republic, this gray territory. And of course, maybe I will show the next slide, the Second Polish Republic, because here is the ethno-linguistic map, and here we can say the contribution, demographically contribution of different ethnical groups, also Ukrainian, the green one, and Belarusian. So we can see the West is really inhabited and through the nations which are not Polish but Ukrainian and Belarusian mostly. So we used to be and build the country which was really of big diversity, cultural diversity, we'd say. But let's go back. And I said that the common history is a little bit provocative because the history wasn't common. Because there wasn't common experience of this history and what happened. And although simple people have lived peaceful next to each other for most of the time, considered as nations, they had different interests. Therefore, different experiences and different cultural memory of the past, what still exists until today. So, especially when we consider Polish settlement on the east and associated processes of Polonization and Catholicization on this territory, and the dominance of Polish gentry, so nobles, in a matter of fact, we can call it Polish imperialism, yes. So this situation caused many conflicts between these two nations, and some of those still exist now on the level of public discussion and even on a political level, like the tragic and bloody historical event in 1942 when 100,000 Polish people died in the Volhynian massacre made by Ukrainian nationalists. This part of history is also a tool of manipulation used, for example, in a hybrid war from the side of Russia. But it's also, or maybe because it's like a spark of ignition. To mention Volhynian massacre, it's like spark of ignition with extreme potential to divide society and national community. It also gives an excuse to condemn contemporary generations of Ukrainians for what happened. That's why it's so dangerous when using. It's enough to mention this point of history in social media, for example, and a discussion after a kind of message, and the discussion starts, and then we see the polarization of groups, yes, and whether we have still problem among the Polish society, the problem of polarization of the community, Polish community, and makes it deeper and deeper, and it also have the potential to divide Polish and Ukrainian nations. But, in the matter of fact, both nations had to fight for independence, Ukrainians and Poles also. And these similar historical experiences built a field of mutual understanding, especially after gaining independence of Ukraine in 1991. It's been confirmed, this mutual understanding by the enthusiasm of Poles and the solidarity shown during the Orange Revolution in 2004 and also during Euromaidan in 2014. I would say during the war, so now the last mentioned aspects, so the solidarity, showing solidarity and appreciating of the struggles for independence, prevail the former and tragical one, yes, this history. And now we can start talking about language. I think the background I already drew to you. It's also important to understand the next issue, so the issue of the language. Here's the first case of a kind of cultural science which contribute to the mutual communication between host society and Ukrainian refugees. What I mean? Let's see. It's a little bit complicated. Forgive me that I use the examples of language, but because it's always complicated for someone who doesn't speak Polish language, but I do my best to make you understand. When we want to say in Ireland, in Germany, in USA, in Ukraine, we use the preposition in, but in Polish language, there is an exception. We say, so in means in Polish w. W Irlandii, w Niemczech, w USA, but na Ukrainie. So you can see that the preposition is different. Why is it so? The explanation, the preposition na is mostly used for description of a territory meant a sub-region, a part of bigger entity. For example, we use na to describe regions of Poland like Mazuria, Pomerania, Kujawia, na Kujawach, na Mazurach, na Pomorzu. So in relation to big part of Ukraine, also Belarus and Lithuania, this na shows that they used to be a part of Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. So a part of something bigger, one big state. So the old historical arrangement is consolidated, I would say closed in language, and still reflects the relations of power and dependence, or power and subordination of some territories, but also some nations. So this is a kind of legacy of Polish imperialism on that area. What's interesting, let's see the Russian version of this lingual expression. I'm in Ukraine, and the Russians will also use the na preposition, ja na Ukrainie. So we are quite similar here in that point of using prepositions. But it used to be like this, because there are some changes during the war, especially during the war. So some people in Poland decided to use w preposition instead of na, what is also grammatically correct. Yes, we can use both versions. And most of all, they do it to support cultural and political sovereignty of Ukraine state and their fight for independence with Russia. Yes. So there is kind of reflection behind that. This expression is a kind of sign we use each time when we communicate with Ukrainians. So it's kind of message hidden in linguistic expression. We say something more than we say in Ukraine, na Ukrainie. And since we know that this expression isn't neutral, but reflects unequal relations, and since we know that language creates our reality, maybe we should care about our way of talking. It's not easy, but it's doable. I still try to remember. And now, another kind of sign which can be used to give a symbolic message, and this is the figure of Cossack. Who are Cossacks? Here we can see a picture of Ilya Repin, the reply of the Zaporozhian Cossacks. I will explain further what it means, but at the beginning, who are Zaporozhian Cossacks? Because there were different groups of Cossacks. We talk here about Zaporozhian Cossacks, so who lived in Zaporozhye as a kind of region of Ukraine. Cossacks were a community of warriors consisting mostly of Ruthenians, so ancestors of today Ukrainians. The community was established in the eastern territory of Great Duchy of Lithuania. They established kind of mercenary army, so paid army, and fought for different lords. So they fought both for and against the Russian Tsar, but also for and against the Polish rulers. But the most important thing, they always preserved their autonomy, at least on the level, on the myth built on this history. The meaning or the meaning of Cossacks in Ukraine, they are seen as a very important part of Ukrainian history and one of the most important source of Ukrainian identity. I would say history has become a myth and its participants have become meaningful figures in Ukrainian culture. And this painting from Ilya Repin shows Cossacks in 17th century who are writing a letter as a response to a sultan of Ottoman Empire who told them to surrender. The letter is an extraordinary refusal of surrendering because it consists of loads of insults, swear words and invectives, and it shows that Cossacks are no one's subjects. So they don't respect any rules how to address to the lords. That's why this lots of insults. The meaning of this figure of Cossacks and this picture and the wartime we can see on the next slide. Here the Ukrainian soldiers acting out a letter writing scene from the painting on the war front. But this time the letter addressee is not a sultan but the president of Russia, of course. And here a similar scene but in Ukrainian parliament. Yes, again acting out the same scene from the painting. And here one more picture. So it shows the role of Cossack figure in pop culture. This image is a paraphrase of the original painting of Ilya Repin created during the invasion on Crimea, so the beginning of the war. As it shows all these crucial elements which belongs to a figure of Cossack, like gun, bars of alcohol, money, also fantasy, courage, freedom. It's very appropriate to illustrate the meaning of that figure in Poland, which is quite ambivalent. Used to be ambivalent and is still a little bit ambivalent. So the former meaning in Poland, from the perspective of Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, named also First Polish Republic, the Cossacks were citizens of the state. So Cossacks uprisings between 16th and 18th century were treated as rebellions, betrayal, and not legitimate acts of national liberation. But this meaning has changed over time in some degree, and in nowadays Polish language the word Cossack has its figurative meaning. Ale z ciebie kozak, you're the Cossack, or kozaczyć, ale kozaczysz. And this meaning is still in use today. This meaning is very ambivalent, as I say, because Cossack is independent but wild, combative but unpredictable, brave but sometimes cruel, freedom-loving, proud, solidary with his own people, with a strong sense of brotherhood, with lots of fantasy, but also furious and crazy. So, in the wartime, I would say the ambivalent value of the Cossacks figure used in Poland changed a little bit toward positive value, positive one, showing an attitude which is needed and appreciated in the time of war. So, struggle for independence, even when in minority, as they were, and no matter the cost. These are the values which are appreciated today during the war. And here, once more, the same picture, here on the right side. This painting was put up for an auction organized by Toruń Foundation Helping Ukraine, named TSPU, Toruński Sztab Pomocy Ukrainie, to gather funds for soldiers' rehabilitation and support war refugees. And I would say the presence of this painting on this auction assumes that there is a kind of mutual understanding regarding the meaning of Cossacks' figure, understanding between these two nations, Ukrainian and Polish nation. Cossack figure is like common code and indirect sign of communication between two nations based on shared values and similar experiences, which are fighting, honor, but also lots of humor sense, which is used also as a weapon. We know very good that humor is a weapon. And here also some signs which are visible in public sphere and form of commercial use of the figure of Cossacks. So the left one is a street commercial of a restaurant in Toruń Old Town, running for 7 years by Ukrainians. And on the second picture, cucumbers, ogórki means cucumbers, Cossacks style or Cossacks art. Well, I don't think the producer made the research what the Cossacks have eaten, but the name of the product is probably based on a simply association with Cossacks as sharpness, Cossacks and sharpness. Spicy, yes, spicy. Their sharpness and the dish is spicy. So, yeah, we can say that the war situation requires being a Cossack from the Ukrainians, and its meaning in Poland is based on a positive association, funny, but also including fighting, for example, in this sharpness. So, and what is important, I think using this figure in public space is also a sign of acceptance and gives courage and hope in the wartime. And last sentence to this this kind of sign, cultural sign, we could see an evolution of a cultural sign. The former symbol of rebellion against the Polish country turned out into a symbol of fighting against common enemy. Well, and this is a kind of summary of what we were discussed here on this presentation. So in a wider context, we could see how the past becomes history, which is told as story or myth, and which creates a cultural figure or language form, which are signs which are used to communicate with people, what is crucial to build relationships. Yeah, so we can see this close circle and the way how the sign in how many ways this sign can use their expression. So, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
I just wanted to ask you a few questions, if that's okay, because you're talking about the history that we share or might not share, which is common but not common. And I wanted to know if the attitude toward Ukrainians differ in the different age groups. Like, for example, do older people treat them through that prisma of history, which is more vivid for them?
Well, I think it's complex. I don't know if I can answer for sure for your question. There were some research made by the Center for Migration Research in Warsaw, some kind of division into special demographical groups. And as I remember, actually, as I already say, in the wartime, the meaning of struggling and fighting for independence is more important than this history in Kresy, yes, former Kresy in Poland. So this area inhabited through these nations, Polish, Belarusians, Ukrainians. So as I could remember, even more elder people support more the presence of Ukrainians here than the young ones. But it's also, as I said, this remembering the past and this tragical event, what happened, this is always a sparkle. And it's also complicated to measure because we don't know who stays behind a nick in the internet, if it's a young person or if it's an elder one. So I can give you exactly answer, but I think it's really more older people are more open for Ukrainians today, than the younger ones. Yeah, we can follow this subject because there is also a question about attitude toward different groups of refugees, not only Ukrainian, which is really a very special group. And this cultural proximity was for Polish government a main argument why we are open for one group and closed for another.
But on the other hand, you have to remember that Ukraine was a very multi-ethnic society. I've read somewhere that there were more than 16 ethnic groups already in Ukraine. So, and they included, for instance, big minorities also of, I mean, we also have Tatars in Poland, but there are even more of them in Ukraine. So it's not very homogeneous society, but it has some things which unite also Ukrainians. And one more thing, when you mentioned these things which are common to now our nations, I think is a way of doing something together in a good way. Because when you mentioned Maidan and all these actions, I mean, there was an organizational need for people to fight for the same thing, and also among our people when the war re-erupted, because it erupted before with the attack on Crimea, obviously. These are the moments when our society gained once again back to the solidarity movement. But at that time, Ukrainians adopted special laws to help the people from the first attack. So it also shows that they were not like going immediately to the other part of other countries, but they moved, for instance, from Crimea to, I don't know, Kiev or Odessa, yeah. So this shows that you try to address your needs locally, and then you ask for others to help.
Yeah. Of course, they have their own experiences with their own refugees on their own country, and that's why this is also important to use use, maybe it's not the proper word, but it's important to, for example, an NGOs or kind of foundation, to have these people, refugees here, to help to make a like a buffer for for people who come, because not only because of language skills, but also cultural qualifications, and that they know the situation the best, and they know how to help, how to talk, how to support. So it's really also very beneficial for us that they know already what to do and how to deal with these people which are in need.
Because sometimes it's like, it's not a bad approach to people, but for instance, especially in this administrative things, you sometimes need a confirmation, you need a letter, you need a certificate, and then people ask, okay, but we don't have this kind of certificate in Ukraine. We have something else, but we say, okay, but our law says that you must have this paper. So as you said, use previous experiences of the people who are already here, because maybe they know how to approach it. And if it's a problem of one person, it's not a problem, but if it's a problem of many people who are not properly addressed, then it becomes a problem for both countries.
Yeah.
And we have a question from the chat from Silvina that probably left us already because she had to leave the classes, but maybe she will be able to see the link, to see the recording afterwards, so we're still gonna address this question. So based on the experience that we had with Ukraine, what are the courses of action you think we can take, particularly by European universities, when we can receive refugees from Palestine?
So how can we use these experiences to the refugees from Palestine?
Yes, probably. Yes. I think that was the idea behind the question, but especially we as a member of the European Universities Initiative, but also other alliances like ours, how can we support them?
Yes, it's a difficult question.
It is.
Because as an anthropologist, what I can say is just to be sensitive for this difficult issues like cultural background of our behavior towards different nations and different people. I think what we can do is talk about it, is to point out this most important elements in this cultural view of a nation, which is always different in different cultures and nations, and to be aware of cultural differences and their cultural background, as we saw here, why we act like this, why we behave while communicated with someone, like why we think about people in a certain way. It's really helpful to know this cultural background, I would say, and we as a community, youth community, can really contribute to this understanding. Piotr, you wanted to add something?
I just wanted to say that the legal situation of these people will be different probably than from the people from Ukraine, but the potential we gathered in NGOs, in social society, this can be used. Plus, we already know what works and what doesn't work, so it's a bit easier for us to organize it. Should we do it centralized or should we decentralize it? And I think that also this discussion can be used as a streamlining factor, because as a researchers we can investigate one thing which is maybe looks good on paper but doesn't work in practice, and this is like both side process. Sometimes Polish history of immigration to asylum law proves this. Sometimes there were some local things, like ad hoc things even, which were working so good that they became a routine. And then somebody said, okay, let's just stop making it because we know each other and it works, but let's formalize it in law. So this can also be helpful when we will compare the situation in different countries. So because, for instance, we don't have people from some areas, whereas our partners may have already people from these countries. So they, for instance, can let us know, hey, this is a problem for these people because of, for instance, legal grounds. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Each of these communities is different. This is what I'm driving at. You have to address the needs of the people, not a group.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and about different experiences from different countries, I wanted to ask a question. I promise that's the last question from my side, is that what we can observe in different countries that are welcoming refugees from a longer period of time, that the attitudes of the society changes, the hosting society changes. And I feel a risk that our welcoming might also change in time, that we might see those people not as refugees but as job stealers, for example. And I wanted to know if that's a real possibility, and how can we stop it, prevent it from happening, or just minimize it at least.
Yeah, you're right. It could be a problem. And actually, when I was talking about integration, I got also, and there was this point that someone has to be free to behave their own cultural identity, and what makes a division between integration and assimilation. And my first impression was that it's not necessary to mention it at all, because the special situation of Ukrainian refugees actually supports their cultural identity and political identity, because there is a war, and then they fight against Russia, and we know it. They want to be Ukrainians, so we understand they don't want to be Poles. But after that, I thought what you've mentioned. Next year, 5 years in the future, 10 years, 15, it can appear, I mean, the struggle to make them assimilated, yes, to assimilate to our culture and be Polish people, because people forget very fast, as you know, yes. So yeah, I think it's a problem. And of course, this problem does that the help and our openness can has its end, but actually it could happen and didn't happen, and in this period of 2.5 years, maybe it's not, the help is not so intensively, but it's kind of long-term help now, like also here, like talking about it and showing this cultural background. So I think we should continuate this kind of.
But maybe you actually already gave the best answers. I mean, help is needed when somebody cannot get something by himself or herself because of different reasons. So maybe they already integrated, for instance, on labor market so well, then this is why they need help. Don't need help. So maybe, you know, maybe this is why we can redirect our efforts to help in long term, because you know, some support is already available because they know how to organize themselves in here. I'm talking about the people who came at the beginning of the war. And there's one more thing. I mean, please remember that this directive also has, and the council decision plus Polish law, they have the temporal limitation. So it applies to people who left Ukraine after February situation, owing to the reasons because of a war. But the question was also what to do with the people who are already here. whose, for instance, permits elapsed. And the European Commission suggested to say, hey, there is no difference between the people who already came because the cities are under bombing and the people who have to go back because their right to stay has elapsed. So the countries can also adopt this thing. So this also shows that maybe because of this, I mean, maybe the changes they want to introduce, so to redirect those social support, maybe they are potentially not a problem to the people because maybe they are already integrated, so maybe they simply do not need it. Because social support should not be considered as something which is like stopping mentally people from, for instance, going to work or doing other things, except for the people who cannot do it because of a variety of reasons. Yeah, because we are talking about people who may have trauma, PTSD, and so on and so forth. So don't expect them to integrate spontaneously.
Yes, it depends also on what we understand under integration. And maybe we should talk about just feeling well, to feel well in the country. Maybe not integrate, but if you feel okay, it's okay for you. So we don't have to struggle to integrate you and invite you to integrate here, but we should do anything that you find all what you need here, and in this way of sense integrate. Yes. So, but there are many so small and subtle things, I would say, which we often overlook, like the language situation and in Ukraine itself, which is divided, as we uses both languages, Russian and Polish. And for me, it was also a great experience to talk with the Ukrainian refugees, because in Poland, more people know Russian language than Ukrainian language. And we use this Russian language, so the language of the invaders, occupants, while talking to these people, and it isn't not for all of them, but for lots of them, it's inconvenient. It's really problematic. And for us also, because I know they know I'm talking Russian and don't like it, but we don't have any other tool to use because I don't know Ukrainian so well. And this many things, I think we should point it out, the subtle things, which we, as I said, very often overlook in the reality every day.
But some already were pages, for instance, of public administration. Also part of our university webpage was actually translated into Ukrainian language.
That's right.
So we can use this modern technology to help the people. I mean,
I mean also the directly communication, like
I know. But when you mentioned this, it came out to me that actually may need like simple things. For instance, Poland was one of the countries, and we should be very proud of it, actually, by the way, to introduce electronic format of documents confirming legality of stay for people in Ukraine. So we have mObywatel for ours, and the people from Ukraine can also have it in electronic format. And then it's easy because they understand what's going on in the application, because you can translate the application into Ukrainian. It's one-time activity. So even though, for instance, local administration may not speak Ukrainian, although maybe they should start learning it. It's a question to you, you know it better.
Of course they should start learning.
But
also,
at least here you can help. Or assistance in for instance, public administration or people who can be this.
Yes, there is also this question about the cultural assistance at school. Children. Some schools do have someone like a cultural assistant, but many of them don't. And this is also a kind of system solution. Yes,
but it has
but not only.
But it has to be agreed, because if you're talking about schooling, I think that there is now a wish to make it compulsory for children from Ukraine to go to schools in Poland. So there will be a need to schools to prepare.
Yes, actually, when you're talking about, I'm not sure if it's good. I don't know what to think about it. Should all children, Ukrainian children living in Poland, go to school obowiązkowo?
Yeah, compulsory.
Compulsory, or not? Because it wasn't.
No. They
yeah.
could, but they
And
could
now
continue.
it is compulsory. So
It
what?
used to be. I think that they are working on this law.
I don't know if it's good or bad. Is it a kind of pressure? Because they can learn still remote. So I don't know what to think about it. What would be better to let them decide? Yeah, we know it's always better when you can decide about your child, about yourself. And here's a kind of pressure. So I'm not
But
convinced.
education is compulsory in Poland for all the children. See, this is the thing. And they can already sign in.
But
for
if
school.
they will say we attend school in Ukraine remote model,
I think this.
it's okay, or
They can do home education, right?
Yeah,
Homeschooling.
exactly. Yeah.
That's a solution for them.
yeah. But the question if the people will use this possibility for homeschooling.
But then homeschooling, I think that it implies that they will still need to pass exams here in Polish school. So even though they will be attending Ukrainian lessons, they will still need to pass the exams in Polish school.
And school also is facilitator, let's say, of, for instance, linguistic training, getting into the society, because I don't know, children go.
People interaction.
Yeah, exactly. Children go to play football. They come back, do homework. So the whole family is learning the language and integrating. So.
Yeah, as you can see, we could talk on and never stop probably, but the time is slowly running out. So thank you once again for coming. At our studio there was with us PhD Joanna Książek from the Department of Anthropology and Ethnology and PhD Piotr Sadowski. And just before we finish, I would like to invite you to participate in other activities planned as part of this UFE Community Engagement Network. That is the workshop that is planned for June and is under the title of Face to Face with Otherness. So it will tackle the issues quite similar, yes, still. So in chat, we will write you the email to the contact person. It's Katarzyna Pawlonka. If you're interested in participating, then write to her. Also, we'll be sharing the contact to Kasia with the people who registered to this lectures today, and that will be in the email that we send you afterwards. So thank you once again for coming to our studio, and thank you for participating. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.